But interestingly, one of the side effects of this equation was that the faster an object travels, the slower time passes for that object. So, if someone was to get on a spaceship and blast off from Earth at 99.94% of light speed and traveled 1 year out, 30 years would have passed on the Earth during the time. There would have been 30 revolutions of the planet around the sun. But the clock on the spaceship would say 1 year. Then if he came back 1 year at the same speed, another 30 years would pass. So while the spaceship was gone 2 years, 60 years passed on the Earth. And I remember all the scientists talking about how you could do this and come back and be younger than your grandchildren who weren't even born when you left. But there's some flaws in this. For example, if you had your own spaceship and you backed way out here in space to point X, and this was your field of vision, and so you've seen this ship go out and come back, and you've seen the planet go around 60 times while it was happening, how much time passed for you? Was it 2 years, or was it 60 years? See, are you relevant to the planet, or are you relevant to the ship? Or perhaps, are you relevant to one of the suns you pass, Alpha Centauri or Alpha Beta, as you backed out into space? And if a year for the Earth is one revolution around the sun, then every 93 days, Mercury has a year. And every 150 of our years, Pluto has a year. So what is a year? We're just measuring the movement of heavenly bodies and comparing them to the movement of other heavenly bodies, and we invented a thing called time. But if you study lineal time, it leads you to the conclusion of simultaneous time. And if you study simultaneous time, it leads you to the conclusion of the non-existence of time. If you look at the time that you have lived in your life, for example, you can look back into the past and you can say, well, this is when I got married, and this was my first job, and this is my hometown where I grew up, and this is my birth, and this is the womb, and beyond that I can't see anything. So let's compare that to looking out in space. If we look back out towards space, let's say we see the Andromeda Galaxy here. And the Andromeda Galaxy, if you look at it, you're not seeing it. What you're seeing is as it was 200 years ago, because it's 200 light years away. And as this light was traveling toward us, which we now see, the Andromeda Galaxy is kept revolving. So if we look back in the past, we find our hometown to be the same way. We don't see the hometown as it is, but as it was when we were there. Here we have black holes, here we have forgetfulness. Space and time is the same thing. Time being the subjective experience of life, and space being the objective, or looking at objects. Now, if we go out 150,000 million light years, we find that since everything is receding away from us in space, and the farther away from us it is, the faster it's receding. This is known in science as a redshift effect. Then at this point, objects reach the speed of light, and not even their light can come back, so we are back to the void. So if from the here and now we find that there really is no time, there really isn't any space, that there are experiences of reality that we have chosen to describe in this manner. Now I know that that's difficult to understand, and I don't expect you to have that concept down at this time, but just to look into it deeper for your own learning, because you need to learn, as we all do, that time does not exist. At the time that we started thinking in terms of lineal time is back about the same time we were also having these great revelations like the earth is flat. But when you look at lineal time, if you look at one tiny object, like say a planet circling the sun, and start comparing it, then you can say, oh, I can divide this into sections and call that lineal time. But if you abstract back and you look at the whole, like the whole human race, you find that every form of that life is present. There's babies, there's children, there's adults, there's old people. So everything's happening simultaneously. So it is when you look out through the universe. So if you study simultaneous time, then you realize when you abstract back one more time that it's just a concept in our mind. There's not one atom of anything called time. It doesn't exist. There's a scientist who began mapping the universe in a three-dimensional way by dropping objects into a cube by their distance from us and their width and depth, and came up with a three-dimensional map of the universe. And this map came out to be as if there were large balloons or large spaces that were void, like the center of a balloon, and around where the skin of the balloon would be is where the galaxies and universes and stars were. And where these balloons joined, so to speak, is where new galaxies and new stars were born. So it was like there was large bubbles of void out through there with the matter around them. So if I was to write into these large bubbles words like religion, love, mankind, astronomy, etc., then these would be concepts that we hold in our mind. And where these concepts join together is where our thoughts come from, the new matter. And so what we're looking at when we look out through space is the mind of God. And it's patterned as our mind because we're created in God's image. So we're literally looking at our own mind in the same way. So once we get rid of our belief in time, our false belief in time actually, and then we come to wanting to understand more and more about God. So God is this definition that I'm going to give of God is seriously lacking in content because I'm not entertaining the Spirit of God at the moment. I'm not entertaining the soul of God at the moment or the mind of God. I want to run an analogy between an atom and a solar system. And 98% of the mass of the atom is locked up in its nucleus, and 98% of the solar system is in the sun. There's the inner protons and the inner planets. There's the K-shell and the asteroid belt. There's the outer planets, and the outer protons, the L-shell and the Oort cloud. So when I look at a solar system, I'm looking at an atom that's too large to see. Or if I look at an atom, I'm looking at a solar system that's too small to see. And yes, I know there's 100 different kinds of atoms, just as there's 100 different kinds of pine trees, but it's still all the same. If we go to this small scale, the atomic structure, and we follow a path, and we look at it, we can follow a path that we have been calling non-living matter. And we find that there's solids, liquids, and gases. For example, hydrogen and oxygen join together to make water, which in the solid form is ice, or liquid, or as vapor. But if we take another path, which is called the living matter path, we see how the molecules join and make up living cells, and then the cells have about 30,000 atoms, and they will have a light-sensitive area that attracts light, and this makes up a living cell. Now these cells then colonate and make up larger life forms like you and I and trees and plants and birds and all the other life forms. So now if we go back from the atomic scale to the huge scale of the solar system, we find as we follow this pattern that about 30,000 solar systems make up a galaxy, approximately the same number as makes up the cell. And the galaxies have this black hole that attracts light. And galaxies cluster together and make universes just as the cells cluster together and make life forms. So we are made in His image, but His image, as we see, is a living being. So the universe itself is a living being. It's alive. It could be said that we find ourselves living on one proton, inside one atom, inside one cell, inside the giant living body of the living universe. Now, our relationship to this God that I'm showing you is pretty much the same relationship that we have to, say, one bone cell in our foot. To that bone cell, we're God. And we find ourselves to be one cell in the body of the living universe, which is God. I'd like to break off here. May I?
So,
So now I'll go to the
this
other.
is very, very,
Oh, I'm
very
sorry.
complex, perhaps, to many of people. But as you say, that they may not be able to see this particular concept of God as you see it. However, we do know that God is infinite, all knowing, and for mortals to attempt to explain God in time language could almost be perceived as an exercise in futility. But since the time language as we use as humans are in the way, at best time language can only become symbolical explanations of God, simile explanations of God, metaphorical explanations of God through time language. This is so very, very important that we understand that time has in its own, let's say, inherent dispositions, elements of illusions. However, since we are calculating our life's existence predicated on yesterday, today, and tomorrow, 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, and etc., then this is just the case that we find ourselves in as a result of what I call the blank evil sin hoax. This began, of course, as you know in these lectures, in the Garden of Edanistan, and that is where mankind fell from grace because he believed not God, to believe in himself and to believe in the serpent that told mankind that God was a lie and that he was in essence the truth. So you see, people, we're dealing with a conglomeration down through the annals of history of, how could I say, conventional myths and these sorts of things. Now, remember when the Christ figure was here in Palestine? He clearly told his disciples, you do not understand many of these things that I'm teaching you. He said, but when I go away, I will send you another comforter, and he will teach you all things that is necessary to be known. Who is that comforter, people? Well, simple. It is the para-Jonah Christocletical instructor. You say, what does that mean? Well, paraclete or parakletos, Greek, means one who walks alongside with you and give you instructions. Okay? Jonah in Hebrew means a dove. That's an emblem of the Holy Spirit. And then, of course, Christo, that's Christ. The para-Jonah Christocletical instructor. He will lift us out, if we listen to his voice, of all of this mass illusions based on a misconception of time. Now, the Bible clearly teaches the seventh-day Sabbath, but it also teaches the seventh month Sabbath, the seventh year Sabbath, or seventh yearly Sabbath, and also the seventh millennial Sabbath. It is so very important that we come to understand this. Now, I believe that Dr. Isaac here is trying to let us know in one way, form, or fashion that this sanctuary, temple, tabernacle, which God designed in heaven, and of course this was long before the existence of a fleshly man, and perhaps even long before the angelic existence of the Luciferian praisers of God at that time. So since in religion we're dealing with God, man, and devil, that seems to be what the controversy is. I like to call that the Sagadmantanical explanations of the Bible. But who is really at the center of this great controversy between God, man, and devil, or the Sagadmantanical controversy? Believe it or not, it's man. That's right. Man is being fought over between God and devil. It is so very important that we understand this, people, that if we understand to some measure of degree, that is significantly, the pattern of the sanctuary of God in the book of Deuteronomy, the book of Exodus, the book of Leviticus, as proscribed there by Moses the prophet, he gives us the pattern. You see, people, how can we understand these things if we don't have a pattern? And the patterns are all around us. You think about it. And there is a term in theology that's called prolepticognosticabilistico-logical understanding. Well, this proleptico-cognosticabilistico-logical understanding is simply God's ability to know all things before they take place, but also to know all things after these major events has ran their course as if they never existed. Okay? Now this is what the Parajonah Christocletical instructor will give us if we humble ourselves at the feet of under wisdom, godly, knowledgeable, principle standing of God. All right? So why don't we let Isaac elaborate a little more of what are you going to do?
Sure. That's pretty much about all that we can get on this one program, and I believe we're going to come back and do one more session. So at that time we will be going into Judgment Day and what Judgment Day is concerning the Western Path, and we will go into showing how that the Western Path and the Eastern Paths are both the same thing, and how they become one. Both are pathways to one with God, the living universe. So I'll be looking forward to doing that with you, and I'll give it back to you.
Of course. Thank you so very much, Isaac. Now listen, people. You want to tune in next week to the golden option once again to hear more about these wonderful, treasurable things that are hidden in the Bible. Did you know that the Bible is a treasure house? It's all there. And if we don't dig, as it is our privilege to dig, guess what? We will never find them. You see, people, when you join, let's say, an ecclesiastical institution, church organization, so to speak, do you think that you have found the truth? That is, the infinite truth? No, people. Perhaps at best, you might have found, let's say, the treasure field where the truth can be found if you took it upon yourself to dig for it and to dig every day for it. And, you know, it is amazing how we worshippers seem to be satisfying ourselves with surface teachings, surface understanding, surface knowledge, and everything is surface, superficially surface. What do we mean by superficial? Superficial simply means on top of the face. That's what it means. Super means upon.Ficial means face. All right, that's in Latin language, of course. Greek, it would be called epipathabakon. See, all we can see on the face. But you listen, people, man is very deep, for God created him to be as deep as God would allow him to be. And of course, as we started out in our beginning of the talk today, Victor enlightened us on the sanctuary tabernacle pattern, because without the pattern, it would be, I think, utterly impossible to understand the entire Bible, which is from Genesis to Revelation. And of course, you understand that the Golden Option teaches that the whole Bible really, that is Genesis and Revelation, is couched in Genesis 1, 2, and 3. That's the whole Bible. Genesis 1, 2, and 3. That's the entire Bible. Why is that the entire Bible? Because that's where the stage was set up for the great controversy to take place between light and darkness. There is your duality, which Isaac was telling us about. Good and evil. See? And in some cases, Sabbath and Sunday. That's a duality in Christianity. Some Christians believe wholeheartedly that Sunday is the weekly day in which Christians should congregate to worship the Creator. And of course, other Christians disagree with that particular belief and believe that you come to God, you ought to come to God on the day before Sunday. Okay? Well, that's a part of the duality and the controversy between good and evil, or at least in some cases, perceptual good and evil. Because in many cases, good in the minds of the people can be translated as evil. And in the minds of the people, evil can be translated as good. So the battle of the gods is on. One thing we do know, that there is a pattern called the sanctuary, temple, tabernacle of God. At least that is a standard whereby we can have an orientation as we search and seek to find the truth. So in closing, I'd like to say this, that this Sagat-man Tanakal controversy. And remember, man is the issue. Because God wants man and devil wants man. So man becomes the center, the all-important center of the controversy. It is so very important that we understand that, because once we understand who we are in the light of this controversy, this tabernacle controversy, this temple controversy, because remember, man is a temple too. He's a living tabernacle, okay, made after the pattern of the original heavenly sanctuary temple tabernacle. I like to call that entire, let's say, complex, and it is complex too. The Sa temple, God sanctuary, man, Tanakabilistico-logical tabernacle mystery. This is how deep this thing is, people. Now, if you want to go week to week, being served baby food and pablum, fine. But if you want to grow in grace, we can go beyond. Why don't we try that? So listen, tune in next time to the golden option, and we will have Victor again, Isaac, to come and enlighten us more concerning these eternal truths. Until next time, shalom, 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 salam, salam, salam. May peace, serenity, and reconciliatorial, tranquil blissfulness rest, rule, and abide upon us all.
Thank you.
Welcome, greetings, and salutation to the golden option. Shalom, shalom, shalom. Salam, salam, salam. May peace and serenity rest, rule, and abide upon us all. Thank you for tuning in again this week to hear Victor give us more insights to the tabernacle temple sanctuary knowledge. Ladies and gentlemen, give a kind welcome to Victor.
Hello. It's good to be back again this week. Thank you. As you recall, last week, we went over the tabernacle and how the tabernacle, as it was carried through the wilderness, is a pattern of the creative process that God uses to create everything in the universe. And we went over how that pattern is a pattern in our lives and how we go through womb, birth, child, puberty, son, man, and rest. I never spent much time last week in the area of growing up in the world, the development of the body, or in the area of development of the soul in the churches, because we're pretty much familiar with those. I spent most of the time in the development of the mind and how we come to understand and take on the mind of Christ. So today I want to go into the development of the spirit and how it works, because the first pattern is the physical body, the emotional body, the mental body, and the spiritual body. Now, all the different paths around the world are basically the same story told in many different ways. When Buddha said, I am one with the universe, and Christ said, I and my Father are one, they were both saying the same thing. If this pattern was in the Hindu religion, the Brahma is the Holy Spirit, or this circle, and Vishu is the sun, or this circle, and Mahadeva is the oneness in this circle. So it's the same story, just told a different way. It appears to me that perhaps long ago, when all the continents were separated, that those who pressed into the Spirit and did so